Let's make sure that you're always up, always running based on what the needs are of the business. So you don't have to be so impacted by any of the rainy day scenarios that may happen.
That's great. Well, we're talking about dinner. We're talking about food. I mean, what do you think, Chef Michael? Are we about that point where we should get into the kitchen and see what's cooking?
Yeah, I can't wait to show you guys what we've been doing in the product to make all this possible. So without further ado, let me take over the screen here
All right.
and show you what it's all about. Okay, so for those of you not familiar with Mavericks, we have a secure hybrid air gap architecture where in the Mavericks user experience here, I'm able to define those identity orchestration policies. And we like to think about it kind of in really simple terms. Your identity fabric, these are the identity services that you want to use. Your applications, whether those are modern applications or legacy applications that accept things like headers, and the user flows. And the user flows kind of bring everything together. That's what the user will see as they're on an identity journey. So the new thing that we've introduced with this product is a way for you to define that strategy. What happens when I'm using I have two identity providers, I have at least two sources of identity, and one becomes unavailable, either a degradation of service or maybe even a misconfiguration. There's something that happens to that. And so you can now define this strategy right here in our UI. And our first strategy that we're dealing with is a failback strategy, which means based on the order that I have defined these, first I'm going to check Okta, and if Okta is unavailable, I'm going to fail back to Entra ID. And in the worst possible scenario, say there is even a higher level of outage, like the internet is down, you can even fail over to an on-prem AD or LDAP system. So one of the things that also makes this possible, we're introducing identity service health monitoring. And so when we deploy our orchestrators, they'll be pinging those identity providers and their configuration to make sure that they're available. And when they're not available, it automatically trigger the strategy. So I've got two kinds of user flows I'm going to show you kind of at once today. The first is those modern applications. And if you've been dealing with legacy, this is really our bread and butter. We allow you to modernize your applications with modern identity and even new strategies with continuity without even having to touch a line of code. And so for this particular application, it relies on headers in order to work. And for this particular resource, what we're going to do is say for authentication, we're just going to use that continuity strategy. And it's going to do all of the work behind the scenes to deploy the configuration so that all the identity providers are available and monitored.
This is
The
great.
other user flow.
I'm sorry, Chef Michael, if I may, I had a quick question for you there. So Chef Terrier talked about he didn't have to touch the application code in doing this, that, as we were doing the pre-kitchen part here. So what you're suggesting, this is all just configuration. We're not touching the code of these applications as you do this.
Yeah, that's right. And so to kind of take a look at, these legacy applications, this is a very typical scenario. It's moved over maybe from a WAM system or web access management system that's out of service. And this application relies on headers in order for it to be authorized. And so what we're able to do is build a policy. We would proxy all of the traffic to the application. We completely control what comes in and out from an identity perspective. And so what I've defined here is I want to say what the authentication is for a particular protected resource. And this application happens to rely on one particular header that we're going to be sourcing from our continuity strategy. So speaking of headers, talking about our continuity strategy, I can't not mention the schema abstraction layer. Here's the reality. Across all these different identity sources, the claims or attributes or the shape of the data is very different, but your application just kind of needs one thing. And the simplest example here for email, which is probably the universal claim that most apps need, I'm going to be sourcing from my Okta service the email attribute. From Entra ID, the claim comes across as preferred username. And from my legacy LDAP system, it comes across as mail.